Thank you, sir. And thank you to the bill sponsors and advocates for your work on this and other legislation to interrupt our uniquely American epidemic of gun violence. I deeply appreciate the effort, and that's what leads me to need to explain why I can't support this proposal and why I hope that some of my colleagues will give it similar consideration. It's particularly tricky to, in a short amount of time, explain a nuanced idea when we share goals. And here when I say we, I mean the advocates and sponsors and myself, and certainly the vast majority of constituents of House District 6 agree that we need to take bold and decisive and data-driven action to interrupt the proliferation of guns in this state. Not being able to support it comes first from an analysis of the necessity of the bill. I'm not persuaded fully by some of the arguments that I've heard around INSA-check alone, but I do agree, uncomfortably agree, with a colleague who spoke earlier who suggested that essentially we're just assigning more resources to a different division of law enforcement to do additional work without an ability to tell us about net safety gains. I spoke at length with a representative from the Department of Safety, very capable and able young person who was able to explain this bill from their perspective. What was concerning is that in all of our conversations, our own Department of Safety could not articulate at all how to draw a line between this bill and safety. And I asked for examples such as, right, is the idea that if we investigate enough of these issues around transactions, that there's some finite amount of bad actors and we can identify them, incarcerate them, or otherwise incapacitate them, and then they're out of the business of doing bad work? Is the idea that those spots won't be backfilled? Is the idea that we will investigate and send a message, rather, right, to bad actors? And it's concerning when asking for, I think it's 1.6, it wound up being $1 million to be allocated to law enforcement. It should be really alarming, actually, not just concerning, if we can't articulate how does that investment keep us safer, or how would it keep us safer? In addition to that, and I guess actually it kind of just runs right with it. You know, we've read The New Jim Crow. We can quote Michelle Alexander. We understand we have this system of mass incarceration, and here's a bill where we have sponsors who care deeply about racial justice, and supporters of the bill who care about it as well. But we have to interrogate, how do we get those bricks that build those walls of mass incarceration? It's by continuing to allocate resources to a thing or a system or a part of a system that has proven itself to be woefully incapable or unwilling to do that thing. A premise on which this bill was based that bothers me deeply, and I haven't heard much conversation about it, that doesn't suggest that others haven't thought about it, but maybe aren't as troubled, is proponents of the bill have told me directly that they're concerned about law enforcement actors in the state of Colorado who will not investigate certain offenses, even when it's hard to demonstrate that they don't have the resources to do so, who will not follow certain laws. We can't continue to allocate massive amounts of funding to one segment of law enforcement because we think the other actors in law enforcement aren't following the law. That's just an unacceptable trade-off for me. And the mention of the new Jim Crow is just to reflect that if we have sheriffs who won't follow the law, that's something to be dealt with in an entirely different way. It's not a justification to give resources to a different agency that further entrenches our reliance on these systems. I'll end by noting how significant it was for me, the conversations with representatives of the department. You have to be able to articulate, if it is a safety-related bill and a gun violence prevention-related bill, you know, these bills aren't a package, despite what some folks would say. You have to be able to articulate, how does doing this, if it works ideally, how would it keep us safer? And they can't. And so it's the gap between that, right? Voting no on this bill for me is no reflection that I'm okay with the behavior of certain bad actors, but it's that if certain folks in law enforcement aren't following the law, it's not an appropriate use of resources to align 1 point however many millions of dollars to another division to do it. It is incumbent upon us to do the work of gun violence prevention in ways that don't double down on the carceral work that increases our reliance on systems that don't keep us safe instead of investing in that which does. I hope that a few of us taking the time to articulate this tension will encourage folks who are in the department and who are going to be stewards of these resources to expect that folks are going to ask every year, hey, did it work? Are we safer? Do we have less guns out there? This is a bill that falls under the category of I really, really am rooting against myself. I hope I'm wrong. I hope this investment does keep us safer. I haven't heard the department be able to articulate how it will, and for those reasons, I'll be a no.